Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tournament Tactician, the premier tournament tier list. Want to quickly explain before I get into the tier list why there have been two gaps in the Tournament Tactician weekly cadence. So 2 weeks ago, top 32 happened. Normally, I like to dive into the top 32, give a breakdown of what the Swiss players played, get into what I think the adaptations would be made going into the top 32. And the reason that I didn't put out one of those is because I sent something very similar to Giant Slayer to post on their YouTube channel. And the one agreement that we sort of have is that I will not double post. If I send them something, it's not going on my YouTube channel. And unfortunately, I think the turnaround time was just a little bit too short. I don't think they actually ended up getting it up either, but it did mean that I could not post it on my channel. So that's why there was no top 32 video. And then last week, I needed a break. I went very hard during the 2 weeks of the seasonal, so I'm actually pretty excited that they're going down to one weekend so that I don't have this like 2 week stretch where I'm pumping out consistent content. It does suck I'll be making less content around it because there's no gap between Swiss and top 32, but that is where a lot of my time went. And then I just didn't feel like a day one tournament tier list out of me was going to be helpful or very accurate because I just needed, there was so much coming out and so many new ways to build decks and cards that this was the set that was going to be the most overwhelming in terms of cultivating a day one tier list. And based on how the weekend actually played out, it does look like I would have gotten a lot wrong. So I am pretty glad that that's when I chose to take a break. But now I am back and should be having these for you every Friday, like normal, for the foreseeable future. So that's good. Now, as for the actual tier list, as Legends of Runeterra matures as a game, we're going to find ourselves with a lot of decks. As you can see here, this tier list is bigger than it ever was before. In fact, I've added another section called Filler, which just kind of sounded better than tier 4. And I think that if there are people, I don't think there's a lot of you, but if there are people that do not watch Tournament Tactician, but check the tier list on a weekly basis, then tier 4 might confuse you a little bit. Where what this is there are decks that I am aware of that are fine. You will probably see them still top a tournament, and I've maintained for a long time that if it goes on the tier list, it's because I believe it can win the tournament, and there were a lot of decks that I was noticing that would like top nearly every tournament but would never win, and then it's like it feels weird not to have those on the tier list. So I wanted a section for the decks that I think are either not necessarily good right now, like they're fine, you can put them in a lineup, you can top a tournament with them. I still don't think you're going to win with them, but it's a lot of things where like if they do have a surprise win, I hate for a tournament to, like a known archetype wins a tournament and I neglected to tell you about it or remind you of its existence or anything like that. So the filler section is kind of for decks that have a potential to come back at some point in the meta, either as a fringe third deck for a counter lineup or just something that like one player is really good at, so you see them topping with it every now and then. It's sort of just a way to cover my bases and make sure that I am not leaving out information that would be pivotal to you, because this tier list isn't about being right, it's about informing you of what you are walking into if you're going into a tournament setting. Maybe you are a busy person and you don't have a lot of time to do the hours of research that I do. That is the purpose of this tier list, for me to take the hours that I've poured into this and write onto you so that you don't have to do all of that. So that's kind of where the filler section is coming in. I'll be updating that as well. It's going to be kind of hard to maintain all of these sample lists, but the ones that I do have on here, I believe all of these decks have been updated. Either they didn't change when World Walker dropped, or they are from someone prevalent on ladder or from a recent tournament. So if you look at a sample list and you're like, wow, this looks really weird, it's because I took it from a player in a tournament, either a top 8 of a tournament or a fight night. I'm not just grabbing random lists out of random tournaments. So that is where all of the samples came from. Now let's get into the actual tier list. So once we get into the actual tier list, it's going to go pretty quick because Pantheon and Aphelios are still at the top. Who could have possibly seen this coming? They've been a problem for months, and there was no balance changes in direct correlation to these two decks. In fact, they nerfed Burn. Good job, Pantheon. You managed to get by that one. So these two decks are on top. That makes sense, right? Thrall's got a lot of cool new tools. A lot of players very enthralled with the way that this deck plays. It's extremely explosive, which makes it hard to play against. You don't have as much agency in that matchup as you would really like, especially since a lot of the times the Thralls are coming out at burst speed. Can't even like ruinate it. Sometimes the Thralls come out before you're even on a ruination turn. So Thralls, I don't think it's too controversial to put those in tier 1. Maybe their ladder performance isn't the best, but in tournament we're really not seeing a lot of aggro. So I think Thralls, just doing very, very well for themselves. And then Bard Galio is more of a called shot on my end. So Shihu posted on Twitter about hitting Masters with this deck and saying that he went from Diamond 4 to Masters with it. Pretty good win rate. So in order to make a meme, because he had mentioned he couldn't get his Runeterra AR stats, I had to play a game of it on ladder to get my own Runeterra AR stats on it so that I could Photoshop the 100% win rate in there. And then I just kept playing the deck and it kept feeling very good. So I really want to draw attention to this one, as Bard Galio is not something that I'm seeing a lot of on ladder. I'm not really seeing players talk about it. I'm not really seeing it in like fight nights or anything like that until last night, where Dudu Nunu actually won Brazil's fight night with it, with a very different list from the one that Chihu posted. So I've posted both versions of them here in the samples. Again, this sheet is in my link tree in the description below, as well as all my other socials, Twitter, all that good stuff. But I want you to be able to look at these two lists because they are very different. Sort of figure out which one works for you. Go from there, because I have been very impressed with the way that Bard Galio plays. It is by a landslide my favorite Bard deck. I think Bard Zed is still very solid. I've actually taken Bard Zoe off the tier list. I think a lot of players are just off of that one. I think that they are realizing that Bard Zed is just much more consistent than the Bard Zoe was, the Invoke whatever. But just playing it more aggressively or more mid-rangey rather than like going for these late game Invokes and all that kind of stuff. So Bard Galio, big fan. Big fan. Putting it in tier 1, calling my shot on that one. Maybe it won't perform this weekend up to the expectations of a tier 1 deck, but I'm going to keep a close eye on this one. Getting into tier 2. Now, I've never loved Demacia. In fact, I've always disliked Demacia. Yet, when I play ladder and think about what tournament lineup I would be running this weekend, I find myself very drawn to both Bard Galio and Luxaphelios, because these are just the decks that I've been playing a lot. I've been having a lot of success. I'm climbing much quicker than I have in a lot of previous seasons using mostly these two decks. So I've been very impressed by it. The problem with Luxaphelios is that you cannot run it alongside Pantheon or Aphelios, which is going to be a bummer for a lot of players, but not everybody wants to run these two decks. They think they have a target on their back where they just find them boring, and we're playing in low stakes tournaments. So maybe Luxaphelios is how you want to switch it up, but I think this is probably my favorite control deck at the moment. I'm not a big Jaceheimer fan, definitely much more of a Luxaphelios fan, but Jaceheimer has been performing admirably in tournaments as well. Viego is a big disconnect from ladder to tournament, where Viego, at least Katarina, is very prevalent on ladder. I think it's the #1 played deck right now, and it is just nowhere in tournaments. And for week 1 tournaments, it didn't exist yet. We were kind of figured it out like on Saturday. Nobody really had time to like enter with it. And now we're not seeing it in BR Fight Night. We didn't see it in EU Fight Night. And I'm starting to wonder, is this just a ladder deck? What are we doing here? Now, I'm not in love with the champion spread here. I don't even mind the Katarina. I've just never really been a big Elise person. I've always been more Kindred, but I do understand Elise in this deck because this is one of the few and far between decks that is actually looking to level Elise very early, because you have House Spiders to synergize with Disintegrate, and you have Arachnoid Sentry to synergize with Ravenous Flock. Like, on paper, Noxus Viego's very, very solid and synergistic, and is doing a lot of things that I'm a really big fan of. And I am surprised that it has not had the tournament success to match its ladder success just yet. And I think this weekend will be a big breakout weekend for it, but I think there's also a reason that I'm unaware of that players are not bringing this to something like Fight Night. So that will remain to be seen. We do have the Online Link Series as well as the GGTour Mastering Runeterra opening this weekend, so we will have a lot of information together. Viego Shurima is still something that a lot of tournament players are bringing to events. It's kind of a leftover from the old meta, doing very well. Jaceheimer, this is the go-to control deck for a lot of players right now, so tier 2. Riven Fizz has been having a big resurgence. Obviously, you can't play it alongside Aphelios, but I think a lot of players are just, BR especially, swapping over to the Riven Fizz rather than the Aphelios. I haven't really quite been able to nail down why, but what I do know is that Fizz Papercraft Dragon is really good, so that goes there. Ruben Pile. For those of you that keep asking me what the Ruben Pile is, it's the same thing it's always been. It's the stupid Piltover and Zon Targon Toolbox deck with Subpercible in it. It's just, it used to be Zoe Vi, and then it was Aphelios Victor, and now it's some combination of the 4. It's the same Ruben Pile it's always been. I've never been asked so many times what the Ruben Pile is. This was a known deck name. You guys complain so much about, oh, we don't have deck names, we just call it the champions. But Ruben Pile was a known factor that I've been using. Like, I've been using this deck name for over a year because it got 2nd place, and I think it won the Empires of the Ascended season, and I called it the Ruben Pile. And nobody asked what the Ruben Pile was then. Now nobody knows what the Ruben Pile is. Bard Zed's a good Bard deck. These are really the only 2 Bard decks that I've been liking, are Bard Galio and Bard Zed. Any other Bard deck, just, I won't touch it. There may be something in the future, but the iterations that we've seen thus far have not impressed me. Even, like, there were people that were on Bard Demacia very early. I think Galio is what we were looking for in terms of just having this big finish potential. And then Alawi Ionia. So Alawi Demacia did very well in the opening weekend, but personally, at least what I've been playing on ladder, and again, I've been playing a lot of like Luxaphelios and Bard Galio, so maybe just having access to the removal that I do has really skewed my perspective on this. I've not been impressed by Alawi Demacia in the slightest. I've never come close to struggling against this deck. I do like the Ionia idea a little bit more. I haven't gotten to see this one play a whole lot, but I know that like Grandpa Roji is very big on this. This seems to be the deck that he is drawn to for this expansion. So expecting some good things from Alawi. Like I said, Alawi Demacia came out very strong week 1. Really not seeing a lot of it week 2. Its ladder play rate is down, so just keeping that down in tier 3. But yeah, Alawi Ionia. Jesus, that's a tongue twister. I'm going to screw that one up a lot. I think is a little bit more well-positioned. If you are looking for an Alawi deck, this is where I would recommend you start. And then tier 3, we just kind of have things that I think are still more popular than what we're getting out of the filler category. Like any of these, I would not be surprised on a given weekend to have like 2 or 3 of them in a top cut, whereas these, I think you'd only see 1 is sort of the big difference here. So Tri-Beam Control, a lot of players still on that Caitlyn Ezreal. Some of them don't agree. They go over to Annie Ezreal. I think players just need to figure out their preference on this one, and we'll get that down the line. Spiders and Pirates, you know, they have a cool new third deck in Annie Jhin. And for those of you wondering, all of the Annie Jhins that have been having tournament success thus far have not played Ravenbloom Conservatory. So just kind of something to keep in mind if you were looking to pinpoint why your deck isn't working like everyone else's is. It might be the Ravenbloom Conservatory, but that is an argument you can have amongst your friends. Yordles and Arms, I think, like just has potential to randomly resurface. Like the tier 3 decks, I don't really want to get into too much. A lot of these should make sense down here. Scion was a strong deck last meta, still going to be a strong deck this meta. Sivir Akshan, always a solid go-to. I just don't think it's competing in an open meta as well as you would want it to, as well as sort of Shen Fiora used to, where like anytime we got a new set, Shen Fiora was a great default. Sivir Akshan has not quite been the same excellent default option when we get right down to it. So yeah, we'll see. But overall, not too in love with how Burn is positioned. I think there are some cool control decks, and maybe once they figure out what they are playing against, they'll do a little bit better. And, you know, at the top here, we just have these more like mid-range or like combo-y decks that are kind of blowing everything out of the water. So that's the meta as a whole. And then in the filler section again, this is more, I'm not going to touch on the filler section too much in a video. That's more something for you to go look at the tier list on your own time and be like, okay, yeah, you know, like I had forgotten about this deck. Thanks Boulevard for reminding me it exists so I don't randomly lose to it. Or I remember like, oh yeah, you know, maybe I can play this. I don't know. Maybe you just forgot about it and you were like, oh, I really like that deck. Yeah, maybe I could, you know, whatever you want to do with it. Again, tier list is open for your interpretation, for you to use it as you will. It is a resource, a tool. But anyway, that is going to do it for me this time around. As I had mentioned, if I were playing this weekend, I would definitely be playing Luxaphelios and Bard Galio. And then for my third deck, I'm not super in love with Thralls. I'd probably go Noxus Viego, just because I really like that deck. I'm a big Viego fan, I've come to find recently, so would definitely give that a shot. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Again, we have 2 tournaments happening this weekend. The sign-up will be for both of them down in the description below, the Online League Series number 45, as well as the GGTour X Mastering Runeterra tournament. Now, me and Doza will be casting the Online League Series Day 2. I do not think we are getting in there for day number 1 this time around. Both Doza and I are a little bit busy tomorrow, so we are not going to have that, but we will still have the top 8. Anyway, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard, and good luck in your tournaments.